Welcome to Healthy Conversations, sharing the knowledge, experience, stories, and the wisdom of herbalists and other natural healers, with your host, Stephen Horn. Today's guest, Jennifer Pressimone. Hi, with me again today is Jennifer Pressimone, clinical aromatherapist, vice president of the National Association of Holistic Aromatherapy, NAHA, and also has her own companies, GenSense and GenSense Aromaversity. I like that concept. You're CEO, instructor, formulator, you play a lot of roles, and you also have a degree in psychology, so that is really good for discussing what we're going to talk about is essential oils for helping with anxiety and depression. But before we do that, on our last one, you talked about notes. And I think a lot of people are not familiar with what we mean by notes when we talk about essential oils.
Yeah. So in aromatherapy, we just like perfume, there's different notes. There's this different level that the oil scent is going to deliver. And so in aromatherapy, we look at top, middle, and base notes. And top notes are going to be those notes that come at you quick. They're very volatile. They're going to dissipate very quickly. So you're going to get them, your citrus oils. They come out, you're like, oh, they smell so great. And then they don't linger. They're only going to be here for a little while, a short while. And then they dissipate very quickly. Our base notes are more of your trees, your resins, these heavy, heavy notes, the thicker oils. They're very strong and potent in their scent. And those base notes, those are going to linger for a very long time. So they're going to come out and then they may, be around for several minutes, for, even up to 30, 40 minutes, depending on how much you're diffusing and what you're diffusing it with. And so those base notes are very grounding. It's your grounding and your root note. And then you have middle notes, which a lot of them fall in the middle. And then you do have some that are top, middle, middle, and middle base notes. But for simplicity, a lot of them, and you think of a plant or a tree, the fruit hanging off, that's your top note. The leaves and the centerpieces, the leaves, all of those, the flowers, those are your middle notes. And then your roots, the barks, are going to be your heavier. And the reason that's important is for a couple reasons. Number one, in blending, when you're blending a top, middle, and base note and you're trying to formulate a very beautiful, fluent scent, you need the right balance. If you do too much of your base notes with a citrus note, the citrus note might get lost. And so there's a balance that has to happen. And then when it comes to emotional healing and emotional health, which is, my specialty, we have to pay attention to that when it comes to emotional sensitivity. Because a lot of times we talk safety of, what you should and shouldn't do with essential oils, but it's often overlooked the emotional sensitivity level. If you do too strong of a blend, it's too potent, it can trigger somebody. It can move their emotions quicker than they can handle. And so when we're formulating, particularly for emotional healing blends for things like, anxiety, depression, all the emotions that come along with that we really have to pay attention to make sure that the top notes are lifting. They're going to be heavier when we need to lift, but they're going to be limited when we need to ground. Like, in depression, we're going to have a lot more top notes. And for anxiety, we're going to have less of that. And so that's a quick little, lesson in the
Okay.
top, middle,
Yeah.
notes.
Now, isn't it true that an oil itself can have a top note and kind of a more lingering part to the scent too? So the initial aroma that hits you is a little different sometimes than the lingering effect of
Yeah.
that oil after a few minutes, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
So considering that, let's talk about anxiety, because anxiety isn't just stress, because a lot of times people are anxious and maybe nothing bad is happening, but they just have this kind of nervousness so talk about some things we can do to help people who have that anxiety.
Yeah, I mean, anxiety, and sometimes people think the butterflies in the stomach are anxiety. Sometimes it's anticipation rather than anxiety, but Anxiety, the heart rate goes up a little bit more. You might talk faster. You have, this more of a spastic energy, the shaking of the hands. And so, what we want to do is use antispasmodic oils, because the
Mm,
antispasmodic oils are very calming to the nervous system and calming to that angst that's happening, this outburst of energy, right? The nervous system is really getting wigged out and it's just freaking out. And so we need calming oils. I go to my flowers like lavender, Roman chamomile are some of my favorite. And then we want to, if you're going to bring in a citrus oil, just to shine a light, I would bring in like a lemon or even a bergamot for that. But the antispasmodics, I find your herbals are going to be very strong antispasmodics. So marjoram is one of my favorite. And then your clary sage, that's being distilled from the flowers and the leaves. Your clary sage is highly antispasmodic, but clary sage can make you very giddy. It can like just it's very euphoric, so you want to use it sparingly for
mhm,
that. So marjoram would be a really good choice. We also want to ground it with more of a base note. So I like to bring in patchouli. Patchouli is kind of like a middle base, depending on what you put in with that, because patchouli is what, I always think the oils are like people. And, if it was wearing a banner, it would say, let it go or release. It's my oil for release. So to release that angst, I would bring
mhm.
in some patchouli. And, there's a strong connection between blood sugar imbalance and anxiety, usually protein deficiency, mineral deficiency. So we have to support the kidneys, have to support the urinary system, but also the glandular system, the pancreas. And cinnamon is one of my favorite for that. So I would do a little bit of a citrus, like a little bit of a lemon, a grapefruit, or bergamot. I would bring in marjoram. I would do a little bit of clary sage. I would bring in some patchouli to really help just balance out that nervous energy with some cinnamon in there.
All right. Are there any other like types of anxiety that you would approach a little differently, or is that just the main thing for anxiety in general?
That's a very general, that's a great starting point. But, as we've talked about, individualized and personalized blends are going to be important. And so we want to go back and look at, there's a couple things. We want to go back and look at what is the trigger of the anxiety? Is it social anxiety? Because if it's social anxiety, we want to bring in our extroverted oils. So peppermint is a great extrovert. Roman chamomile is an introvert. Peppermint is an extrovert. Anything with like that camphor, eucalyptus, those are extroverts. So if you're having social anxiety, then you want to bring in some element to help you channel your extrovert self. And so, that's going to be beneficial. And then sometimes it's anxiety that's attached to an emotion, say grief. If we're going through grief and there's anxiety with that, then we want to go to our grief supporting oils. Ravensara is one of my top grief oils. So obviously rose, geranium rose, bergamot, those are all great for that. So we want to look at what is that trigger. And then the other thing you can do is what I call olfactory sensory testing. You're going to smell the oils. Maybe you have 5 oils in front of you. Forget everything that I said. Go grab your oils, whatever ones you have, and smell them. Whatever ones you like are the ones that you need right now. It's going to help you
Yeah,
where you are right now.
and what I've seen is when you smell it, you tend to lean into it, whereas if it's like jolting
Mhm.
to your system, you tend to pull away from it. So that's another little clue is whether you're like drawn to it or whether you're like, no, get that away from me. So let's move on and talk about depression. I know that David Winston in the herbal community talks about like 20 different kinds of depression. And the idea that all depression is the same is not real. So why don't you give us some tips on working on different kinds of depression? Because obviously they're not all the same, right?
Right. I mean, again, we have to go back and we look at what is the trigger? When's the instigator? Is it something physical going on in the body? Is the gut in so much turmoil. And I find, the intersection where the liver and the digestive system, the gastrointestinal systems cross, at that intersection, that stoplight there at that intersection is broken. It's not working. And so nobody knows where to go. There's chaos. And everybody's kind of just stuck going, who's going to go next? And we don't have all of the right neurotransmitters getting to the brain because the neurological system's not being serviced. It's not being fed with all of the things that it needs between the enzymes and the minerals and the nutrients. So we have to go back and look at gut health. And then we want to look at how is it presenting? How is it happening? Is it, spastic? So, for example, diarrhea versus constipation. And that really, people that have chronic diarrhea have a different type of depression than those with a constipation. Constipation, they're stuck. They're internalizing some things, they're holding on and stuck. And with the diarrhea, it's more of like they're victim, they're crying out. And, you're going to have two different levels. So we want to look at how is it, and then we're going to match up oils with the right properties, the right benefits. And so, looking at depression, yeah, there's going to be a generality, but then we want to look at, is it a neurological? Is there really neurological and cognitive deficits? Is it a gastrointestinal deficit, different organs? I know Dr. Ballas has talked in the past about the emotions attached, that we learn from blood chemistry, whenever you're looking at different, blood numbers and ranges, there's emotions attached to that too, that can kind of give us more insight into body systems, organs.
Well, let's start because we know that there's a huge relationship between gut health and the brain. And you just mentioned two different things that could be associated with depression, diarrhea or constipation. So why don't we talk about some oils that would be for the nervous system for the person who's like everything's going too quickly, and the other one they're holding on to things. So
Yeah. So with
they're different emotional states, right?
Yeah, they are very different emotional states. And you think of, somebody who, if you've ever been around somebody and you're like, oh my gosh, they are just too much. Like they have diarrhea at the mouth, literally. Like you're having a conversation with them and they're going a mile a minute and they're in a lot of different directions and they're not making any sense and they're crying and then they're angry. That's what's happening when there's diarrhea happening in the gut. So it's putting them into a depression where they think, I'm losing control. I'm losing control. I'm giving my power away. And so there's certain oils for that. We want to go to our tree oils like cedarwood, I've mentioned, to help you stand in your power. And so I wouldn't do a whole lot of patchouli because patchouli is the release oil and you're already releasing. So I would do patchouli with constipation, but not necessarily with diarrhea. And then you want to go in and, of course, with that, do antispasmodic oils. And so marjoram is one of my favorite for that. I do like a peppermint to help with that. Things
Doesn't
that are
doesn't marjoram help a person like control their appetite, emotional energy? Uh, yeah, okay, that makes
Yeah,
sense.
I mean, when you're giving your control away to help you hold on to that, we want to do astringents, right? So anything that has astringent to tighten and tone, antispasmodic properties, those are going to be very powerful at that. I do like a little bit of lemongrass, not a lot, but maybe one drop of lemongrass, whereas I would probably do more lemongrass with constipation because with constipation, the opposite is happening. They're harboring everything, they're holding on, they're internalizing their stress. It's kind of the difference between an outburst of grief or silent grief, or are you just holding on and biting your tongue and swallowing, your pride and swallowing, not speaking up for yourself. There's a huge thyroid connection there because you're not speaking up for yourself, you're not finding your voice. With diarrhea, you're just not articulating. You're not communicating and you're not articulating. So myrrh, vetiver is great for that. But
Hmm.
on the constipation side, we want to look at more stimulants, what's going to help us release. So that's where the patchouli and the lemongrass are going to be a little bit more beneficial. Rosemary. black pepper, those are going to be more powerful. Even fennel, to help get things moving so they don't stay.
Great. That's very helpful. So, what other remedies would you have for other aspects of maybe depression that a person might have?
So looking at the emotional side, sometimes, just really feeling defeated. Defeated has been a common thing, especially among entrepreneurs, among people at work, fear of failure. That's a
Hmm.
huge one. People dismiss like the power. It's not just fear, it's fear of failure. And then that fear of failure kind of builds up and it mounts up, and then that turns into feeling defeated, and when you feel defeated you surrender, and when you're surrendering, the kidneys, right, we hold the emotion of fear in the kidneys, and so that's going to really be connected with people having a lot of urinary issues, bladder issues, prostate issues. And so we want to go and find oils that are going to be a little bit astringent. So I love geranium, I love pine to help with that type of depression. But then we want to go in and say, okay, what's going to help with this fear, particularly fear of failure? And I love frankincense and ginger together. So when you put
Mm.
frankincense, I think the oils are people and they all have personalities, and you're putting teams together. So you're bringing in the frankincense and ginger together to really kick that fear of failure. And then for the defeatedness, I love things like bay laurel, sweet basil. And then we want to look at the surrendering, right? Surrendering is just giving up. We've got to infuse some hope. And
Hmm.
so bringing in flowers like helichrysum and Roman chamomile can be powerful for that.
Terrific. Wow, that is some great suggestions and also some great insights into how different things going on in the person can contribute to the depression. Because too often in the allopathic model, we treat the label. Someone's depressed, so we just say, okay, these are our remedies for depression, instead of looking at the person and trying to understand what's going on with the person and basing remedies on those. So I really love your approach to aromatherapy. It's so holistic. And so we're going to, if you'd like to learn more and get more information from Jen, we're going to put her links and resources in the description below so you can get a hold of her. Really appreciate you being with us today, Jennifer. That was just amazing. So God bless you. God bless everybody. And we'll catch you again on a future episode of Healthy Conversations. Hit the like button and subscribe to our channel to catch future episodes of Healthy Conversations. Help us educate others by sharing this video, and please feel free to share your own thoughts, comments, and questions below. To learn more, check out the links below.